Sorry, I had my other computer on too.
Very, very echoey. So let's just go ahead. We're going to create so I just CD'd out of my classes directory back into my week 5. And let's go ahead and create an app. So a React app. All right, let's do our counter demo. I'm just going to split a new pane. CD into that while that's downloading. Just open this up into code. Okay. Right, so now that that's done, I can CD into it again. I'm just going to run yarn start. So I think for this, split these just so I don't have to go back and forth between screens. All right. So I'm going to step into my app.js. And let's go do a basic counter example. So first of all, I'm just going to delete this because this is a function component, function app. Let's delete this function right here, and let's write it as a class component. It's actually been a second since I've done this. So class app. So there's our class keyword again, same as Ruby. And I'm also going to import React from React. Okay, so this is going to extends. We're going to use this extends keyword. So this is the same thing that we're just talking in Ruby like that, this chevron. Except we have to use the extends in JavaScript. So I'm using inheritance and I'm going to extend from React.component. And then let's export default app. So there's my class. That's how I build a class in JavaScript. I do class app. I don't have, like, if I don't want to extend anything, that would be it. But I do, in this case, I do want to inherit from React. So I use my extends React.component. So see this there, instance.render is not a function. So what's happening is behind the scenes, React is creating an instance of this class, and then it's trying to call a render method on this class. And then it fails because render is not defined, or it's not a function. So something we need to do with all of our class components is we need to define a render function. And now I'm getting another error that's like, hey, your render method should have a return statement. And then let's actually return some JSX here. So here's what I have to have when I define a class. This is like, I need to extend the React component, and then I have to define that render method. And that the render method is just that final like JSX that I return.
In the notes, I saw that it just said extends component. Are those just two different, what would you call them? I guess components, libraries, I don't know.
No, yeah, so there's two ways I can do that. So I could import React from React, or I could also import like the component, because it exports this component. So I need to import that, and then I could do it.
Okay, so that's doing the exact same thing. It just kind of depends how you write it.
Yeah, because React is an object. I could do the dot component, or I could import component. Yeah, those are going to be the same thing. So it just depends on which one is cleaner or which one you like more. So with Ruby, we had the initialize method. With JavaScript, this is not React, but JavaScript, if we want to, call that, we can use our constructor method. So this is going to be called, the constructor method is going to be called when we create a new instance. So I could just say, like initialize in Ruby. And this one, and this is more like a React thing. So now, yeah, our constructor can take props, and then we want to call our parent component and just pass them. Just something we do in React. For React, we have our constructor, we create these props or have this parameter props, and this called the React component constructor with the super. So same keyword there. But then I can come in here, and now I'm not going to use an instance variable or an @ symbol, because we don't have that in JavaScript. I'm going to use this. I'm going to call this state. So in our constructor method, we can set default state. I'm going to use it on this. Now this keyword is going to, it's like that self keyword where it refers to this instance of the class. And then we can come down here and we can say count is going to be this instance of the class dot state, and state's always going to be an object. So I can grab like the value off of that object. And I can set the initial state here in the constructor. So this is like setting. So let's write this setting initial state using constructor. There's also a shorthand method. Where we can do it like this. refresh. So you might see this like two different ways. You might see the constructor being used where they do props and then super props and then say this dot state and then set their initial state there. Or you might see it like this, where just right up above, they just say state equals.
Does that mean you can't have more than one state?
No, because this is just an object. So I can add as,
Just add them in.
so I could have a value, that could be a number, I could have my people, that could be in an array. Have like my hat, yeah, hat, I don't know. So yeah, you can, this is the state's now just an object that can have all of your state.
And how would you do that in the constructor? Would you just, in
Similar.
this dot state, you would just continue on right there?
Yeah, like that. This dot state equals that. Cool. So let's do our increment and decrement. So let's do a button. Add and minus. Okay, let's do this. Let's do our add first. So I'm going to write this function up here. Now I'm not going to use const. I'm just going to say I don't need it. I just do add. And let's just write this as a function like this. Let's do our arrow function. So since I'm in a class, I don't need to say const, and it's going to give me an error if I do. Because I'm now defining an add method on the app class. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this. Now there's actually a method. This is a React thing called set state. This is how I set my state. I just take my value and then grab the value, which would be this dot state dot value plus 1. So I throw out a new object. So this dot set state, I pass it a new object with the things I want to change. So I want to change the value, and I want to change the value to this dot state dot value, the current value, and then add 1. Click add. Oh, I don't have a click handler on my button. So I need to do it on click. Well, this is going to be, this is where I say this so many times. The on click event handler is going to be equal to this dot add. So grab this instance of the class and call the add method on it. There we go. Now it's working. All right, let's do.
Real quick, why doesn't that need to be in an empty function? How we usually do on click,
An empty function.
or what do you call them? Usually on click, you have like the,
Oh, the arrow, the anonymous function.
yeah, the anonymous function. Yes.
Remember, we only need this if we have to call it.
Okay.
Because if I save this, I get in this error. maximum update depth exceeded. Because what's happening here is it's not waiting for the on click, it's just calling the function. So actually something that happens when you call set state, it's going to set the state and then it's going to call the render function again. Well, now we're in an infinite loop. Because we call the render function, which calls the add, which sets the state, which calls the render function. And there's my maximum depth exceeded. So there's like a stack overflow for like a. So yeah, in this case, I'm not passing a parameter, so I don't need it. But if I like were to pass something, then I need to wrap it in that anonymous function. All right, so there's another way. Let me show you this to prove to you this works. There's another way I can write this, because another way you can write functions in JavaScript is like this, function add. But since we're in a class, I don't need that function keyword. Just like the same way I didn't need the const. So this is, so I don't get a syntax error there. But now my add function doesn't work. I get an error. It calls it. So it's actually calling the add function. Cannot read properties of undefined, reading set state. So in this case, what is undefined? This is undefined. 16. This keyword right here is undefined. Let's make that an arrow function. It's defined. Okay, let's also do this. Let's do a console.log of this. Expect. Clear that. So if I click the add, there's the this. The this is the app. It's this instance of the app component. Has the add, it has context, props, refs, but it has that add function right there. Because it's an instance of the app class. So it's this instance of the app class is calling add. If I make this not an arrow function, and I click add, I get my error. First, let me comment this out so we can at least log this. This is now undefined. Okay, so just a little, there's different bindings of this with those functions. So that is a difference between an arrow function and a not arrow, just a regular function expression. So arrow functions are a newer feature. They're ES6. So before ES6, you would have had to done this. This dot, you thankfully don't. This dot add equals this dot add dot bind this. Let's refresh that. Now it works. So here in my constructor, I'm saying this dot add. What I'm really essentially saying is, hey, and this is like hard to say because I'm going to say like this so many times, but it's what I'm saying is bind this instance of the app class to this add function. So in the add function, now that this is going to refer to this instance of the app. It's really, this is a stupid JavaScript thing you had to do. It's like, so yeah, you can either do this where you can either have this option where you bind this in the constructor, or you just use an arrow function. And then this will behave like you expect it to behave. This keyword in any, like, it's kind of like the self in other languages, like Java has the this keyword, C# has the this keyword, Ruby has the self keyword, they're the same thing. But the this keyword in JavaScript is particularly a little more confusing. It's already kind of a confusing concept when you first learn about it. And JavaScript makes it more confusing. So for now, well, for now, we're going to avoid class components. And then the other thing you're going to do is on your functions that use this, you can use an arrow function. But render isn't an arrow function. So this is why it's a little confusing. I don't have render as an arrow function. I just have it as a normal function. So how come this is defined here, but not in this one?
Is it inherited?
No, it's not the inheritance. It's really because like this add function is it's an event. So like this gets bound to like the event. Since render is not an event, this is referring to this instance of the class. Like this not working right here is kind of like, you know, JavaScript, I hate you. Like, why? But it's just how it is. But JavaScript was nice. I think people were complaining, so they're like, let's make this arrow function that binds this to the instance no matter what. And it's like, thank you. It makes, I don't know, it makes sense once you like get it, but I think it's really confusing when you're starting out. So. And yeah, our decrement is just going to be the exact same, except we're just going to -1. But we can change other stuff inside of here, like let's change hat to hat changed. So my default value of hat is hat, say minus on here. When I click add, I just add one to the state. But if I click the minus button, it's going to set the state, it's going to change state to -1, but then it's also going to change hat. That's right here. Oh, I put that one, DEC. I have 2 minus buttons. Okay. So that subtracts 1 and it changes my hat to hat changed. Cool. So yeah, like we did, I could come in, you know, maybe I probably don't want that app class. Like I want this counter in its own specific app. So I'm just going to copy this app component and make a new file called counter.js. Throw it in here, counter. I don't need to import that CSS. So it's like, it's essentially the same thing. I just renamed renamed it to counter, and export counter. And then in my app.js, just go ahead and get rid of all this. Maybe I don't need that state anymore. Inside of here, I can now have a whole bunch of counters. So think of these as like my instances of counter. I need to import those. So they all have their own state. They all have their own this dot state. See, this dot state. Their states are different. Same way, let's look how we do props. So when you're using the components, they're not going to look any different. Like you can't tell that counter is a class component or a functional component when you're using it. Does that make sense? Because you're going to use it the exact same way when you're rendering it. So I can come in here and I can give it props. So maybe we want these to have different names. Let's counter instance 1. Instance 2. So I'm passing the props to the counter component, but I'm not using them anywhere. So how do I get these? Well, I'm going to go ahead and instead of saying app, I'm going to say this. So grab this component, this instance of the counter component, grab the props, and props is just an object, and then grab the name prop. There we go. So just for reference, let's do this as a class component. We did this like the first week. Let's kind of make this the exact same. Counter.js. I'll call this functional or func. So if I were to take like this component and be like, okay, let's copy and let's change this to a functional component. Well, I don't need this component, but I'm going to need use state because I have state. Just going to get rid of this. Make this into a function. Cool. There's my function. So I have this value state people and hat with these default values. So I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to say value, set value equals use state 1. I'm going to come in here and create these individual getters and setters for all my state. So that's one big difference is in the class component, you have just one state object. And then in my functional component, I might have these different getters and setters to hold a different state. I don't know why I said hat. But. Okay, so that's how I create my initial state. This is, I no longer have to worry. So if I have my add function, I'm not going to set the state. I'm going to use my setter. So that would be my set value. And then I just grab my value +1. For my minus, my decrement, go ahead, set value to that -1. And then also this one, I changed the hat to change. I changed that value. So I no longer need, since I'm in the functional component, I no longer need the render function. I just need to return that JSX. And something I need here, I need to pass, props just isn't automatically attached. I need to like throw that as a parameter to my function. And then I get rid of the this keyword because I no longer have this because it's not a class. And it's not state.value, it's just my value state. That's my hat. That's my add. That's my decrement. I can just rename this. Get rid of all this constructor crap. So yeah, I think in my mind it's just a little cleaner than the class component. You don't have to worry about this keyword, it's just a function. Let's go ahead and make sure that works. Counter func. Oh, these are not defined because one thing now I do need in my functional components, since this is a function and not a class, I do need to define these as consts. There we go. So same functionality as a functional component. But yeah, as I was saying, when you use them, it's not like you can tell that this one is a class component and this one's a functional component, other than the fact that I call this counter func. Questions there? Something we could do to clean you know, this function up is here. You might do some destructuring. Like I could say const name equals this dot props and const, you know, hat value. You could destructure your values off of here to make your JSX a little more readable. So it's not this dot props dot name, it's just name value. I'm going to go back to the way it was just because I want to be clear on the drilling into the values, either through this dot props or this dot state. So let's keep going. I'm going to go away from this counter example, but are there any questions on that? you think the functional ones are cleaner? I mean, you're more used to them, but this dot set state. That's what's going on there. So let's do like a little more, let's kind of do some CRUD actions, because that's going to be your homework today. It's just on a React, you're going to like redo the contact list, but with class components. So let's do a little demo on that, because we need to learn how to do like component did mount and that kind of thing. So sorry, I'm just pulling up the notes. This is on today's lecture. It's the contact list notes. So that's what I'll be following. Let's just do a little demo really quick of what we're kind of going to be building. Just a visual. So our components, so we're going to have our app component, which is going to have a contact form, and then also list of contacts and a contact. Right? We've done this before. And we're not going to use React Router or anything, I don't think. This is, yeah. So we'll just have our contact form, and then we'll get a list of contacts and then a single contact. Those are like our components. So let's go ahead and build this out. Now, I'm not going to create another React project. We can just do this inside of this one. So, but I will get rid of these counters. All right. And yeah, let's go ahead and add with this one. Let's do some more semantic. Seems like you all did a good job with semantic UI on the hackathon. Oh, I spelled React wrong. I'll select this out too, semantic UI CSS. Sorry, I'm getting there. Oh, sorry, Raphael, I just saw your Slack. What RB files do you want? Raphael?
Everything.
Everything? Okay. During the break, I'll create a repo and throw all those Ruby files on a repo. And then I'll throw this project on a repo as well. Okay, so now we have semantic installed. The last one thing we need to do with it, semantic, to get semantic working is just to import the CSS in our app, in our index.js. So I'm going to do semantic UI CSS / semantic .min, I believe it is, .css. Yeah, okay. Now I can see that CSS is being imported. And let's just make sure, I mean, if that we got the React part right. So instead of doing a div, let's do a container from semantic UI React. That should give us a little bit of padding. And there we go. There's our container. So we have semantics set up. And then I'm also going to slack out our state for our contacts. We're just going to use some dummy data. So let me edit that. There's one thing missing. Okay. So take this state and just throw it in your app.js before the render function. Cool. I'm going to get rid of all these counters. Let's come in here and let's create just our files. Let's do our, I don't know if I want a context. Let's just do a contact.js. I'm just gonna, well, yeah, fine. I'll go with the notes. Let's do a contacts as well. And a contact form. And for the contacts, I'm going to slack this one out. We're just going to keep this one, we're going to leave this a functional component. It's really, the contacts is just, here's just in the demo of a table in semantic. How you might do a table. So our contacts component, we have our table header, our first name, phone, and options. And then we're going to get this contacts prop, which is going to be our array of contacts. And then we just loop over our contacts. And we're going to go ahead and, you know, do this table right here. Sorry, table row for each contact. So then in our app.js, should be able to grab this contacts component. And then pass it to contacts prop.
I think you put that all in contact form, not contacts.
Oh. Probably, so that probably means that, okay, yeah. So I need to import that from contacts. Let's get rid of this. This cannot read property map of undefined, so it's saying contacts is undefined. Oh, because I said this dot sat. Contacts equals this dot sat. It's this dot state dot contacts. And there we go. There's our lovely table. You know, the name, phone, and delete button. And I think this is a good, let's stop. Let's just stub out our contact form really quick, and then we'll take a break. I do want to, we'll definitely fill this contact form out, but let's just come in here and just do something really simple. So we're going to do this one as a class. So once again, extends React.component in our curly brackets. Then we need to define the render function, which needs to return some JSX. Export default our contact form. And then in my app.js, I can go ahead and render that contact form. There we go. Any questions here? I'm gonna create a repo for this and push it up, but if you don't have any questions, you can take a break and come back at 12. But I'll be around if anyone has any questions or needs anything. Okay, both of those, the classes and the React ones are up there now.